welcome to the Irish NFL show, and welcome to our recap of the Week 11 NFL action. My name is Shane Brennan. I'm joined by Brian O'Leary, Kieran Boyle, and Noel Dowling as we break down all of the stuff which is going on, including the toppling of a certain Kansas City Chiefs team who lost for the first time this season. But before we start, we'd like to remind everyone that Thanksgiving is just 10 days away, or 9 days, if you were listening to this podcast on Tuesday morning. So don't forget to join us in Buskers on the Ball. We will see the Bears face off against the Lions and the Giants face off against the Cowboys. Free entry in, and all points are €6. What is there's nothing better to be doing in Dublin on a Thursday night. Let's not forget, of course, that matchup between the Cowboys and the Giants will be the long-awaited battle between Cooper Rush and Tommy DeVito. And if you're wondering why I'm mentioning old Tommy Cutlets, there's some breaking news today, which we will address later on in the program. But first, I think it's only fair that we get into this weekend's storylines. And a reminder that this show is brought to you by QuimBet. And I wonder, guys, if QuimBet was doing American football odds back in 1972, what odds you would have gotten that the Miami team of 72 would still remain as the only team to go an entire season unbeaten. Because as I mentioned at the top of the show, the Bills managed to topple the Chiefs. The Chiefs suffered their first defeat of the season. Josh Allen pulled a fantastic play in the fourth quarter, 4th and 2, ran the ball in, get a touchdown. I think he's proven to everybody that if he needs to do it himself, he will. But I think the Bills probably need to take more credit than that, Brian, that so much of the talk is on Josh Allen, on how well he plays. But I think as a team, in terms of the offensive schemes they're playing, in terms of the way that Cook in particular was performing, I thought he was very strong in the touchdown that the Bills got in the first half. I think it's fair to say that as much as people will talk about Josh Allen, the Bills as a team probably deserve more credit for how they performed in a very, very tough matchup against the Chiefs yesterday.
Yeah, I suppose it's been this kind of dynamic over the course of the season that Josh Allen is carrying his team, would carry this season, carried his team, and ultimately did only go as far as where Josh Allen brings them. But by and large, over the course of the last, say, 5 to 6 weeks, we've kind of seen the transition, in particular since that game against the Texans, which they lost, with Sean McDermott was questioned for some of the play calling at the end. I think they've evolved nicely. You've seen some players. They've got an evolution of wide receivers in the sense of there's not just one guy now. It used to be Stephon Diggs primarily, and then a tight end in Knox. And then the running game was something they never really had, I suppose, not want to say huge interest in, but they weren't really kind of branded as a team with a strong running game. But now that's kind of turned. Cook is gradually, slowly starting to become the player, which a couple of years ago, me and Kieran discussed as a player, we'd love to see in the Giants in the running back room. I think he went in the late second round, and he's really kind of turned into a lovely addition now. Shakir's doing well. We've seen other players step up yesterday. And defensively, they were very good yesterday. Like from the get-go, there was an interception very early by Mahomes. But over the course of the 4 quarters, I know the Chiefs had their moments, in particular that kind of short touchdown, which was a dart from Mahomes right in the corner of the end zone. It looked like he was running out of opportunities. I think by and large, they held Mahomes in check, and they did a good enough job. But I still felt as the game moved along, it was one of those games that we've seen all season where Spagnuolo does a number and finds a way for the Chiefs to come back and win, which is, I totally understand. When I give out about 4th downs yesterday, I totally understood the 4th down, because if you kick a field goal with 2 minutes to go, you're giving Mahomes the ball 5 points down with 2 timeouts. There's a real opportunity for the Chiefs to go and win it. So going for that 4th and 2, obviously it turned into a touchdown, but ultimately they wanted to get the 4th down, which was killing the game off, and that's how it transpired. It's a great win. It's probably a great win for the league in general, because Chiefs win yesterday essentially wraps up the number 1 seed. Now we've got a lot to play for in the AFC. It's not a foregone conclusion that they get that number 1 seed now.
Yeah, it is an interesting thing, though, because I was casting my mind back to the matchup between these two teams last season. And of course, the Bills ended up coming out victors in that after all the controversy around Kadarius Toney being offside and so on. But the talk around here is, okay, now that the Chiefs have finally lost, the burden of trying to carry that undefeated season might be actually lifted from it a little bit, and that might help reshape their focus on attacking going further into the playoffs. With these two teams being in the playoffs, and you still wonder whether the psychology of the Chiefs might still be able to bring them forward. And I look at this, the way this one played. Of course, Patrick Mahomes did throw a couple of interceptions yesterday. One of those was the last play of the game. I'm not quite sure how much you can really read into that. But Kieran, when you look at the way the Chiefs have been playing so far this year, I've been very vocal personally that I think the Chiefs have been due a beating. There's been a lot of games where they've kind of gotten away with it. There was referees calls that went their way, for example, against the Bengals. There was the way that the game finished up against Denver last week. So they've come up against a tough challenge. They didn't succeed against a Bills team that managed to push on. But we know that this Chiefs team, once we get into Thanksgiving or further on, they will find a way to use everything that's gone against them to build a mentality which can bring them further into the playoffs. And they're still a very, very dangerous outfit for anybody to come across between now and the end of January.
Oh, they're hugely dangerous. I mean, what I will say is I think a lot of us, we agree that the Bills were going to either give them a real close game or pull off the victory. I had the Bills winning this one. I think more than anything, it's the fact that when it comes down to matchups, I really like what the Bills have been doing lately. Everyone knows about Josh Allen, his ability with his arm. He had 55 rushing yards yesterday with that touchdown, but I did question the Bills' offense and how they were going to look without Stephon Diggs, but it seems like it's stronger than ever and that was even without Keon Coleman yesterday. Amari Cooper and Shakir and even Samuel all pitching in. Even Matt Collins making a couple of plays, but with the Chiefs, they were due a loss. I think we can all agree that this loss has been coming. Mahomes said, it was cool to have that kind of record, but now it's all about getting the number one seed, and it's all about, plowing on in the playoffs. That's the first loss in, I think, 17 games. And let's not lose sight of that. This is a juggernaut. This is an absolute, unit in the machine, and you take them lightly at your cost. And it says a lot about, about what the Bills did on that fourth down play, just going for it. And, Mahomes or, Allen dropping back and then just running all the way in. That's a statement. I think, Jim Nantz said it was the play of the season. It's not far off. I mean, that was a huge kind of statement for the Bills to kind of stamp on the Chiefs' throat and say, we're not gonna lose this one today, and you're not gonna sneak up with 30 seconds left and get a field goal and win this. So, a really great performance. It's just how we thought it would be. It was back and forth, lead changes. Mahomes is never out of. He's like a tick. He's never done till he's been decapitated and dismembered. So he's never out of it until the zero on the clock. So, you've got to kill any opportunity for him to come back. And the Bills did just that. They were just great across the place. And when you got that Western New York crowd behind you, Bills Mafia were out there from sunrise. Just, that's a huge bonus for them too. That crowd just giving everything. All that was missing was the snow, a little bit of a breeze. The sun was going down as the game started. It was great theater. And, it was a great game. And I'm really glad that the Bills got the victory.
I have said some of the greatest theater around that game was Bill Cowher, I think, jumping into the table in proper Bills Mafia style and ended up breaking it in half, which is always good fun. But no, as Kieran was alluding to earlier, I think Jim Nantz referred to that play by Josh Allen as the greatest play of the season so far. Does that mean Josh Allen is the greatest player of the season so far? Does that launch him really into the MVP conversation, considering what we've seen as a defeat to Lamar Jackson? Where does Josh Allen really fit now in that race? Is he now on top of that pile?
For me, he is. Look, he's definitely up there. We came into the season, there was a lot of turnover at the Bills. We wondered what was going to happen. Was Josh Allen going to be enough to maybe bring these players who aren't your, household superstars? We know they made these big changes, and could Josh Allen carry this team? Well, he has been so far. I mean, to say carry it, obviously that's not to take away from the guys who have all stepped up, but they've been able to spread the ball around. But it's Josh Allen who's dictating this. It's Josh Allen who's controlling the strings and doing everything. And as Kieran said, Coleman was missing yesterday. Dalton Kincaid was out yesterday, and they still were able to bring these different players in on the ground, in the air, against, arguably the best team in the NFL, the champions from the last 2 years. So for me, Josh Allen he's absolutely cruised along this season. He's really looked like he hasn't skipped a beat. He hasn't missed any of these players, and he's taken this team, as Brian says, this team goes where Josh Allen takes them. And yeah, for me, he's definitely the favorite up there with a couple of other people who are pushing him. But if things keep going this way, I'd be crazy, or it'd be a tough one to bet against him, I'd say.
Very much so. Well, I guess in terms of betting against the grain, I think it's fair to give our flowers to Kieran when we talk about the other Super Bowl team from last year, the San Francisco 49ers, who lost against the Seattle Seahawks. You were the only one who predicted it. I think all of us had faith in the faithful that they would find something, but I think we've seen now the 49ers have had a bit of a divisional problem. They've lost a very close one to the Cardinals. They've lost a close one to the Rams. And now they've lost a close one to the Seahawks, this time at home. 12 seconds left by the time Geno Smith ran it into the end zone. And I thought, in terms of red zone defense, I thought the 49ers did not cover themselves in any glory. And I'm just wondering now, when I'm watching the 49ers, do they have a bottle problem? Do they have a problem of closing out games? Because I think from Seattle point of view, as you predicted, Kieran, they have the ability to light up in the fourth quarter when Geno Smith links up with DK Metcalf, for example. But if you're a top defense, as the 49ers should be, you have to wonder, what's in their game plan? Why aren't they making enough plays to close out these games? I think it's a very difficult question for people to understand, considering how good the 49ers were last season.
Yeah, and they're just not the same as they were last year or even the year before. There's something off with this Niners team. Yes, they've had injuries on offense, but the D just hasn't clicked like it has been in the last year, especially last year or the season before. A couple of things kind of swayed me towards the Seahawks. Geno is a different beast when DK's on the field, and I told Noah last night, when he's out there, he's a safety valve for Geno. He made that incredible catch towards I think it was in the fourth quarter yesterday. And he just brings an extra dimension. I mean, DK is an absolute beast. He's a Megatron sized receiver, just huge hands and ability to make some incredible plays. But I just felt that Walker was due. The Seahawks have been up and down. They've been a roller coaster all year. Wins, losses. I just felt like the matchup really helped them. They were going into San Francisco, a lot of pressure on the Niners. This defense, again, it's Fred Warner and not a lot else help for them right now. And they're not able to make the stops on third down. They're not able to make the big plays. They're giving up big plays. And I just felt that the Seahawks, between Walker, Smith and Jigba had a big game. He had over 110 yards. And Kenneth Walker on the ground with that touchdown too. I just think that the matchup felt right for me for a Seahawks win. I wouldn't call it an upset, but it was one of those where a lot of people thought the Niners were going to win. But I'll give Geno his credit because it's been a tough road for him the last couple of years. But nice win for the Seahawks, and I'll take the slings from the Irish faithful. I won't have any doubt about that. But people forget about the Seahawks defense as well. You got Leonard Williams, you got Byron Murphy, and even Julian Love back there. I mean, all those kind of things just play into a decision I made to pick the Seahawks. So I'm not sold on the last ability of the Niners right now. There's a lot of problems going on there. But I will say Purdy has impressed me this season with his scrambling ability. But it's just, I think we can all agree it's not the same Niners. And, it's going to be win or bust this year, I think.
Yeah, one thing I find interesting about Purdy is he completed 21 passes, but only managed to get 159 yards out of that. And I think it's a similar story to, for example, what we were seeing out of Aaron Rodgers in New York, is that if you can't get yards out of completed passes, then it's going to be very difficult for you to go somewhere. And Brian, when we look at the 49ers in the context of the NFC West, it's a very evenly split division. The Cardinals are on top in 6-4. The Niners, the Seahawks, and the Rams are all on 5-5. This is a division that the 49ers are probably coming into this year thinking that they could quite easily take control of, because none of the other three teams were displaying the promise of being an elite level team. So what do you think is going wrong here? There has to be one or two things that we consistently overlook, because I think too much of our focus every week is on the fact that, Christian McCaffrey's back and they have the receivers and they have what Brock Purdy can do. But too often now they come into situations like this and things just keep finding a way to go wrong.
Well, it's not the same offense as we saw last year. The players may be there, but it's the rhythm and the structure is completely different. You lose Brandon Ayuk to a long-term season-ending injury. Debo is not playing at the level in which we saw last year. You touched on there, Purdy's numbers are so low. But just let's reflect on last season. How many times last year did we see Purdy throw a nice little sling way and Debo or whatever particular player takes it for 30, 40 yards on the yak? Like this. So many of those opportunities last year that we're just not seeing this year. Kittle's had a much better season probably this year than he did last year in terms of he's been much more effective. He's getting in on the act and touchdowns. You lose him yesterday, that's a big loss. McCaffrey's come back, and in the last fortnight, like the footage doesn't lie. He doesn't look the same player. He clearly, for me, is still playing injured, and I understand the nature of why they had to bring him back, because the offense was stuttering. They weren't playing well. They got over the line last week. They never had control of this game 24 quarters. What we saw from the Niners last year offensively, 9 times out of 10, when they were winning effectively, they were taking control of the games early, putting them away. Even discussed early in the season where the score maybe may not have been reflective of the games themselves, even the Patriots game in Santa Clara. And for that game yesterday, even when they got the ball back, what was it, 3:43, and that's the opportunity. You've got McCaffrey. You should be finding a way to get numerous first downs, essentially kill the game without the clock. Couldn't. And then I think the biggest factor actually late on, you talk about the defense, the Bosa and the hip injury, because Geno was struggling at that stage of the game. And fair play to Gino, and I acknowledge he came with a great drive, 11 plays, 80 yards to win the game. Bosa going out of the game was crucial because he was the one that was time and time again harassing Gino, getting there, getting the sack, the hits on him. And once he went out of the game, he looked so soft on that final drive. It just looked like the talk, we'll keep them in check, we'll give them the first down, but they're never going to kill us for the big play. And then all of a sudden they're in the red zone, and you leave yourself exposed to Geno Smith, who ran the ball quite a few times yesterday. And effectively, it's a big win for the Seahawks. And just to double down on what Kieran said, we said it when they beat the Falcons on the road. Collectively, as a unit, when this defense plays well, they're one of the best in the league. The problem is they don't put it together time and time again. Yesterday they did, and the opportunity is huge. This division only has one team coming out. If you reflect on where the Packers are, the Vikings, even the Commanders, there's only one team coming out of the West this year. I'd be surprised if a team comes out as a wild card. It's still there for the 49ers, but there's a lot of work ahead. They've got a huge game on Sunday. Packers on the road. I mean, that's a marquee game itself. It's going to be. But if they were to lose that, bear in mind, Seattle play Arizona on Sunday, there could be a big swing in the division by next Monday morning.
Things are certainly touchy in that division. As they are in the AFC North, Noel, we saw the Steelers manage to pull off a touchy victory over the Ravens, 18-16. All 18 points kicked by Chris Boswell, the kicker. That's the second time this season, by the way, that the Steelers have done that. They've won a game by scoring 18 points just from field goals. But the last time that happened, that was when Justin Fields was quarterback. Now Russell Wilson has come in. I think people were expecting better performances from Russell Wilson yesterday against the Ravens. It didn't quite work out that way. You have to wonder now, considering where the Steelers are sitting, and they're sitting at 8-2, they're a game better now than the 7-4 Ravens. You have to wonder how far the Steelers team can go with Russell Wilson as quarterback. We've spoken so many times in the past about how we always expect the Steelers for something to go wrong or people start backing against them, but the Mike Tomlin way keeps pushing them forward. The fact that he's never had the losing season. We saw it last year, and that was even with a terrible offense with Pickett at quarterback and the whole Matt Canada experiment. At least this year, something is working better. You combine it with that defense, and the Steelers have a lot of good parts there, but there are still question marks over how far Russell Wilson as quarterback can carry a team in clutch games like this. In fairness, the defense and a lot of other things fell their way against the Ravens yesterday. They got the win, and a win is a win. You can't deny that. But when you're looking at the way the Steelers might move forward when it comes to key games in December, key games in the playoffs, I think there are still some questions that Russell Wilson has to answer.
Oh, absolutely. Look, there are questions at quarterback for them. Russell Wilson came in and he started really well. But I mean, obviously that kind of a boost was going to peter out. You weren't going to get that week on week. But what they just wanted was a quarterback to come in who has experience and is able to make those big plays when necessary, because this is a team that relies on this defense. It's probably the best defensive line in the league. So when you have this kind of a defense, you really do just need a good offense to kind of capitalize on what your defense is going to do week in, week out. And the Steelers have those players. Najee Harris he's been good the last few weeks. He'll get those yards and he'll keep running. I mean, we know George Pickens, when he's on form, can make some amazing catches. So they have players there on offense to score points, but they're not going to do it week in, week out. I agree with you. I think there's still questions at the quarterback situation. I don't think Wilson is amazing, but he may just be experienced and good enough to kind of help this team go forward. My worry would be, I think they're going to the playoffs. I've no kind of doubts about that. But it's when you get into playoff, one and done football, you're going to need a bit more. Then you can't just rely on your defense and Boswell to get all the points. So that'll be interesting to see if Wilson, over the next few weeks does continue to integrate into the team and is that kind of solid quarterback that they need. But look, you worry about that tomorrow. Today is about winning the AFC North. They had a massive game against the Ravens, which was just as typical an AFC North game as you're ever going to see. Two really good defenses. The Ravens come in, obviously, with Henry and Lamar. But this Mike Tomlin team, I mean, I said it in our preview during the week. This is why I kind of went for the Steelers in the end. They always seem to have a plan with this defense for Lamar Jackson. And again, it turned out yesterday. And, they've done enough then. It comes down, obviously, Tucker misses a couple of field goals. Boswell hits all of his. And the Steelers get that really, really close win. And you said it, Shane, it's just about getting the wins for now. And as I say, it'll be interesting when the playoffs come about. Will they have a bit more on offense to help them? Because you can't just rely on this strong defense to try and get you through in the playoff football. And that's going to be something to kind of watch as the season progresses.
Yeah, it's an interesting one. I listened to a couple of things around the Ravens, though, on their side of things, and two things struck out at me. Firstly, I think the Ravens are probably starting to build a bit of an AFC problem. Like we've seen it a couple of times they face against AFC North opponents, that defenses seem to have good enough game plans with them. Whenever they face against other AFC opponents, things maybe go awry more often. For example, they lost against the Chiefs at the start of the season, just the way that they generally perform once they reach the playoffs. And I think the reason why is because defenses like the Pittsburgh defense know how to play against Lamar Jackson. We saw what the Pittsburgh did is there was a lot of blitzing, but not a lot of pass rushing at the same time. And they have 5 guys up there, but they're containing him and trying to control his options. And I think we see that with some of the passing stats that have come out. You know, it's rare to see a game where Lamar Jackson is attempting over 30 passes and there aren't that many rushes. And that's another thing as well. The Ravens seem to, in a couple of games like this, just change their game plan and deviate away from what usually works well for them. So, Kieran, when I'm looking at the Ravens and performance like this, obviously maybe we're looking a bit too much into a divisional matchup. There's still a lot of ways to go in the season. But when you consider the way the AFC teams may be learning how to defend against Lamar, the way that the Ravens struggle sometimes to build a properly consistent run in the way that, for example, the Chiefs had in the earlier part of this season, and other weaknesses around the defense. We talk about the aerial defense not always being the Ravens' strong point. It does seem to me that in an era when you have Josh Allen and Patrick Mahomes and all the things happening on the NFC side, the Ravens may be just becoming a team which will always be up near the top, but never have the actual grit to finish the job. And it's a shame, really, considering all of the talents that they have.
I mean, Lamar is probably still one of the top runners for MVP of the season. But he just can't beat the Steelers. They've always had his number. Tomlin's always got a scheme for him, and he just can't do it. And you kind of felt like there was a kind of an ominous tone to the start of the game when Henry fumbled the ball, and that just was the pattern for the game. Just stranglehold that defense. I mean, we joked about all the Steelers need is T.J. Watt and Chris Boswell. Well, that's all they needed yesterday. I mean, 6 field goals. I mean, good God, that's not exactly attractive football, but it's AFC North football. I mentioned to Noel yesterday. All that was missing was 20 degrees and about 6 inches of snow out there, and just struggling to move the ball anyway. It was all defense, and I'm more concerned about the Steelers than I am with the Ravens because this is another game for the Steelers. Bill Simmons had a funny comment this morning. Every Steelers game seems to be a war from the 19th century. It seems like all the scores are either 18-16, 18-14, all these battles from back in the day. They can't beat 20 points. They can't, and that's going to be a problem come playoff time. I just don't see the ability for them to put together, anything more than 20 points. This is another score in the teens for them. And I just, it's hard for them to get going at all. But going back to the Ravens, the pass defense is very questionable. Other than Marlon Humphrey, it was another tough going for the Ravens today. And as Henry goes, the Ravens go. He was kind of held in check a little bit yesterday. And Lamar was just hamstrung the whole time. He just could not get going at all against that Steelers defense. So we talked about a couple of weeks ago when the Browns beat them. Is that a blip? But it seems to be, that's another game that the Ravens really need to win to kind of get some sort of identity on the season and not just be another Steelers loss. Because, there's been so many of those in the last number of years. I mean, they were held to a league low or a season low in points scored. Only 65 yards for Derrick Henry. That's not a winning formula for the Ravens. I mean, they'll beat up on other teams, but the Steelers are a different opposition, especially when they're at home. So, it's tough to say. Yes, the Steelers will make the playoffs. How far they'll go with this offense, I'm not sure. I probably have more faith in the Ravens going further in the playoffs with their offense.
Well, I guess, Brian, just very quickly, if the Ravens are going to go far into the playoffs, of course, they would like to see Justin Tucker being a little bit more accurate. I think he's now on 6 missed field goals for the season so far. Missed one from 47, another from 50 yards out yesterday. As much as we were talking about quarterbacks and defenses, of course, when you see one team kicking all of their field goals and another team not, and the difference is 2 points, you have to wonder, is Justin Tucker maybe past his best?
I wouldn't say he's past his best. I think there's many a team and many a GM who, if he came available tomorrow, would be jumping all over him. But he has shown inconsistencies this season. It was a bad day overall for kickers by and large. You've seen the situation with the Bears game where it come to there was McPherson Sunday Night Football for the Bengals missing a number of field goals. But we spoke on the show on Thursday. I think we all agreed that like this was, and he's pretty much summed it very well. This was always going to be a game which ultimately came down to the last play, and one team might come out the right side of it with a field goal and a 3-point win. But here's a 2-point win for the Steelers, and those field goals were crucial and they were critical, and they were in times in the game. Sometimes it's more about when they missed the field goals. Like they weren't gimmies for him yesterday. Bear in mind the nature of what he's achieved in his career. For me, that's the thing today for Harbour will be most frustrated about. Whatever about Lamar not having the better games. I mean, this also happened in Cleveland a couple of weeks ago. Let's bear in mind they lost another AFC North clash on the road against Cleveland. Justin Tucker missed a crucial field goal in the third quarter of that game, and that was another gimme for him. So things certainly aren't right for him. But a field goal here and there in a swing, and they could have came out the right side of those two games. I don't think the Ravens will be getting too overly concerned. I still think there's a lot of opportunities for this team going forward. I'm with Kieran on this. I think like once they say we're saying they can't get over 20 points, they scored 27 last week. Sorry, 28-27 victory last week in Washington. But by and large, this Steelers offense isn't going to put up huge numbers, and I think that's the critical point at the juncture of the season when they come up against the bigger teams who can win and put 30 points on you, even with the defense in which they have. Can they respond? And ultimately, I don't believe they can, and that's where I think they'll come short. Get to the playoffs all right, but there'll be too much of an ask come playoff time for me.
Well, one final point before we reach our halftime break. Noel, your mate, the person you interviewed a few months ago, Darren Rizzi, is bringing the Riz back to New Orleans. That's a word, Gen Z word, by the way. I'm not quite sure how many of you know the full meanings of the word Riz. If you don't know it, you probably ain't got it. But the Saints have won this.
And tell me.
There's an Urban Dictionary about it somewhere. But the Saints have won the second game in a row. They came up against the Browns yesterday, and it feels like it's a formula we've seen before. Derek Carr completing most of his passes, managed to get things moving, and Taysom Hill managed to running 3 touchdowns. This is what was working at the start of the season. Somehow New Orleans have managed to refine it, and you have to wonder in the slow bicycle race that is the NFC South. Are there a few more feathers to be ruffled by New Orleans though?
Yeah, look. Who knows? I mean, this Saints team have been weird. They started on fire at the start of the season. They were amazing. Then they go and they lose 7 in a row. Switch the head coach. As you mentioned, Darren Rizzi comes in as the interim head coach, and they win 2 on the bounce. Now, look, this is a bad Browns team. Let's not make any bones about that. This is a team that most teams are probably beaten this season. But still, for the Saints to have gone through such a bad run, to, as you say now, get back into exciting football again, putting up yards again. Derek Carr had a really good game yesterday. He was 21 for 27 for just under 250 yards and 2 touchdowns. And you mentioned Taysom Hill. I mean, when Taysom Hill is on form and running the ball in like that, the Saints are a handful. So, yeah, look, it's going to be interesting. Can he do enough now? There will be talk, I imagine, for Rizzi to actually get that job with the kind of performances they've been putting in. Again, I think there's bigger tests to come. It'll be interesting in that division, as you say. It's kind of up and down at times. We see the Falcons yesterday have a terrible day. The Bucs, have a lot of injuries. They're still fighting hard, but, it'll be interesting to see what kind of results they get. So the Saints will think, look, just go out there, win it for the interim head coach and just keep winning. And you never know what happens in this division. And they have exciting players to do it. They, Kamara there as well, who, when he's on form, is a really exciting, tough player to bring down. So, look, what can they do? They were on such a bad run. For them to have flipped it and reversed it the way they have over the last 2 games itself is a massive, massive turnaround and a massive boost. And we just keep an eye on that division now to see if it's something they can keep going. As I say, I think the Browns yesterday are a poor team. So, there'll be a tougher test to come down the road. But, I mean, the Saints are doing everything right over the last 2 weeks. And that's all you can ask them to do. Beat the teams in front of you and continue to improve. And that's what they've done 2 weeks now in a row.
Yeah, before we head over to the second half, Brian, you have a point on Taysom Hill.
Sean Payton was asked, I think it was last year, he said they were given like a wish list of 3 or 4 players he'd love to sign with the Broncos, and Taysom Hill was one of the ones he put on the list immediately because he does so much for you. He can play quarterback, he can play running back, he can play tight ends. And when we say the Saints have gone back to what they're doing at the start, so you might say the Saints have gone back to what they were doing when Sean Payton was the head coach, which was using Taysom Hill to his skill set, in which he has, because they haven't really been doing that over the course of last year, in particular under Dennis Allen. I think Darren Rizzi's kind of said, let's evolve back to teams that we know work essentially in this offense to get us back on the right track. And he's the standout player. Kamara played well yesterday, but like Taysom Hill yesterday, he went off and won yesterday. 3 touchdowns, like that's a hell of a feat. If they keep using him, but ultimately what happens is the more and more they use him, the more he gets banged up and he ends up out again. But yeah, they've kind of. I think the game was as despite the score, it wasn't as comprehensive as it may seem. The Browns were there for large parts and they made silly mistakes. But yeah, no, Saints. I think it was worth calling out the nature of that performance yesterday. But I don't think they're ready yet to win this division. I think the Bucs and the Falcons may have better days ahead.
Very much so. Well, we're going to head into break now, and afterwards we're going to discuss the dramatic ending between the Packers and the Bears. But at the moment, we're just going to take a quick break. Welcome into part 2 of the Irish NFL Show review of Week 11 of NFL action, and I think one of the most dramatic parts of the weekend so far, Kieran. I'm going to start with you and avoid Noel for a second. Is the ending between the Packers and the Bears when a blocked field goal managed to keep the ownership alive of Green Bay over Chicago? And I think this really sums up where both of these teams are now. There's a talent level, there may not be a huge difference, but when you're a culture of winning, you find ways to win, even if you're not always performing 100%. And when you're a team like the Bears, despite the fact that you might bring up game-winning drives, sometimes you end up finding different ways to lose. We saw it in Washington, and now we saw it against the Packers. And you have to wonder, firstly, from the Packers' point of view, it's nice to get the victory. They're now sitting at 7-3. Jordan Love managed to get that touchdown in the fourth quarter, managed to keep a lid on things, even though Josh Jacobs did most of the heavy lifting. But it probably still feels nice for them to know that despite the threat that's coming from everywhere else in the division, the Vikings, the Lions, and the Bears team probably rejuvenated by the arrival of Caleb Williams, that they're still able to get victories like this on days like this against Chicago.
Yeah, I mean, the Packers, they got out of jail yesterday. I think we can all agree. They had Josh Jacobs running the ball nicely, but Christian Watson put up 150 yards, and that was the difference. That was getting him out there and racking those yards up. But Love is still not quite. I don't think he's quite there yet. I don't think he's recaptured last year's second half kind of performances. He's still been a little iffy, not quite exactly where people thought he would be in year two. He only went 13 of 17 yesterday. Didn't do a huge amount, in the air. Had some rushing yards, 261 in the air, a touchdown, had an interception. But again, the Packers, it comes down to, have you been there before? Have you got that little kind of, as we say, muscle memory? Despite the fact that they've got a lot of new players on offense, the Bears are just, and I'm sure Noah will go into it in more detail. The Bears, it's still really tough for Caleb to get the ball going with this O-line. Just struggling, not able to get into any flow. He threw the ball 31 times. Yes, 231 yards is not a bad return, but he got sacked 3 times. Very similar to early in the season, very similar to last season in college, just scrambling, running into a D end or running into a nose tackle and just ending up on the ground. So just tough going for the Bears. But the Packers just totally got out of jail. The Bears should have won that game. I'm not overly impressed with how the Packers performed. Again, another kind of slugfest like the Steelers-Ravens game. But I'll let Noel kind of wax lyrical on the Bears, but not hugely impressed with the Packers, and they're probably worrying right now because the Vikings got another victory, and we all know what the Lions are doing. So they've really got to start up in their game if they want to stay in contention with the other big boys in the North. But it's just, again, Love not totally where you want him to be. I'm sure the Packers are a little concerned about it too. But again, not to labor the point, but they definitely dodged a bullet that game.
Yeah, I just do think it is interesting from a Packers point of view. Of course, remember last season that Jordan Love, once he got into this Thanksgiving period, that's when he really started to kick into gear. And I don't know whether a lot of Packers fans are kind of waiting for something similar to happen again. But keep making the point, he has to keep better control of the ball. Another interception yesterday, despite the fact he only attempted 17 passes. I'm not quite. He was, as you said, Christian Watson being able to get a few explosive plays is what really drove that Packers offense on against the Bears team that, again, should be winning games like this. And no, I just found it interesting when I listened back to some of the hangover from the Shane Waldron era, the fact that players were asking to be coached, please coach us, please do something for us, stop being so nice. And then you see how the O-line continues to perform in games like this. I mean, this is a game that the Bears should be winning, considering the talent, considering the fact that the Packers, as Akira mentioned, probably aren't firing on all cylinders. It does feel like a culture shift is needed for the Bears to really take a step forward in a division which is becoming tougher and tougher every year.
Absolutely. I mean, look, this Bears team has talent. It really does have talent in there, but they don't have a winning mentality. They're too used to losing. This is a team now that continues to snatch defeat from the jaws of victory. Week in, week out, we had 3 games last season where they were 95% or more in the fourth quarter percentage to win that game, and they lost 3 of them. They had that Washington game there 3 weeks ago where, again, they were up in the 90s to win the game, and they lose it on a ridiculous Hail Mary with players not being focused, coaches not making decisions they should make. So this is a team now that has the players there. I mean, I think when you look at this offense yesterday, it certainly looked better. Now, I don't know if this is a new OC bounce and one of those things you get with a new coach for a week or two, but Caleb was certainly getting rid of the ball quicker than he had been before. They were much better on third downs. I think over the last 5 or 6 games, they barely got a fourth down on third down. Yesterday, they got 6, I believe. They got 3 fourth down turned to fourth down. So it definitely was better on offense. Defense does what it always does. It stood strong until it didn't. They'll look good and then they'll give up a big run, or they look good and Jalen Johnson will fall over and suddenly Watson goes for 60 yards to the 15-yard line, which sets up that final touchdown. So they have talent there. But for me, this coaching is just bad. Eberflus should never have been here. The more I watch Jim Harbaugh, I have no idea if he would have been interested in going to the Bears or not, but I think it's negligence if they didn't make a call to just sound him out to try and find out. They stuck with Eberflus, and I think this is what's going to cost them. I think this mentality of not winning is coming from a head coach who is 5-17 in one-score games. You think even law of averages, you might balance a bit more, but they're not. So for me, I think this coaching staff is holding these players back. I think the players obviously can't escape the blame. I think Caleb Williams has had a poor few weeks. He's held onto the ball a lot. I know the offensive line gets a lot of the criticism, and they deserve a lot of it. But there's been a lot of sacks on Caleb as well, who has held the ball for way, way too long and taken sacks. Even yesterday in that final drive, he took two long sacks that actually looked like it was bringing the Bears out of field goal range. Until then, he makes an amazing play and he brings them back in again. And this is what they need to work on. They need to work on the mentality of these players to learn how to hold on and just win that game. And they need to look at his coaching staff, which I think they will do at the end of the season. I think Eberflus at this point has shown that he hasn't got what it takes to push this team over the top. And I think we'll see a change there. Between now and the end of the season, for me, it's about Caleb Williams. It's about continuing to develop him, continuing to make sure that that this is the guy, that they haven't made a mistake in drafting him, and just concentrate on keeping him going and developing for this season. And then I think next season, as with the last 2 first-round drafted quarterbacks they brought in, there'll be a new head coach coming in for his second season. And please God, third time is a charm, and they'll take it from there.
Yeah, it is. Sorry, I was just still thinking about the idea of Jim Harbaugh being there. I was surprised if a Michigan man might move over to Illinois. Who knows what could have happened, and we'll touch on the Chargers in a minute. But first, let's talk about the USC man who went to Illinois, Caleb Williams, Brian, because you have a point just in terms of how he's been playing in general. I think it's important, especially in the context of how other rookies, if you see what's happening in Washington, New England, Denver, it's difficult to properly judge whether Caleb Williams is getting the most out of himself so far this season.
Well, I wanted to make a point that Noel kind of touched on it briefly there, the nature of his performance yesterday, because Thomas Brown yesterday had a game plan, and essentially it was a 3-step drop game plan because no one even really called it out how effective he wasn't getting the ball out quicker. Take the sacks. I acknowledge the sacks in the last drive, but yesterday, the performance improved yesterday because I think the Bears have acknowledged this offensive line, unfortunately, is not where it should be at. So the only way we're going to evolve and get ourselves in a position to win this game is to get the ball out effectively and quick. And the Packers defense couldn't handle that all day. There was a sharpness about the Bears offense by and large yesterday for large parts of the game. And then even the allowing, like he had 9 rushes for 70 yards. Like that's beyond what we've seen, I think, over the course of the season. Like I know there was some stumbling blocks yesterday, but by and large yesterday, and maybe it is a bump. You know what? We touched on it last week. A new offensive coordinator comes in. The Harbaugh thing, sorry, is interesting. I read an article today about the neglect of the Bears and the Raiders, because he's a former Raider as well, that neither team went to the trouble of picking up the phone and sounding him out and see if he had an interest, because they said he's too, not troublesome, but he's too a particular mind of how he wants to go about things. Probably like a winning mentality might be the one for the start of a head coach who's gone into LA, and look what he's done already with the Chargers. Look how quickly Herbert is evolving into the quarterback that he is, because he's put a winning mentality. That Chargers team yesterday, I know we're getting away from this particular game, that Chargers team, the nature of that game played out yesterday, previous years, lose that game. But they don't now because Harbaugh's the head coach. And that's ultimately what the Bears need. And hopefully for Nolan and for other Bears fans, that will come to fruition this offseason. They'll find the right head coach. But my fear for the Bears is they go down the route of an offensive coordinator type of Mott, who hasn't coached in the league before. For me, the standout candidate would be Mike Vrabel, but I don't know he would adhere to Bears fans' liking, but he has the mentality of a coach that has gone to an AFC Championship game, understands the nature of what needs to be done to rebuild this team up. He, for me, would be the standout candidate come next season.
No, he has too much personality. The Bears don't do that. It'll be a first-time offensive coordinator. The only time they've ever done that is John Fox. They won't touch it.
Well, moving on. So Brian was mentioning the fact that the Chargers almost chargered last night when it came to their battle against the Cincinnati Bengals. What I mean by that is they were 27 points to 6 up. Cincinnati ended up scoring 3 touchdowns in the second half to tie it at 27, but J.K. Dobbins ran in a 29-yard run at the end to what ended up being the game-winning score. It's a great sense of X factor, but it's also, Kieran, I guess, a shift in the way that the Chargers have been playing. This is the Harbaugh way now being brought in. We see players probably get reaching their potential. That defense has generally been one of the best in the league now. They had a tough battle against Joe Burrow yesterday, but I think it's fair to say that all the talk in the AFC is being about, the Chiefs and even the Broncos and AFC North teams. The Chargers are sitting at 7-3. They're on a nice run. They've shown in a game like this, in prime time, under the lights, they've been able to sort of remove their DNA and get a big victory here. And you have to wonder how far they can go with all the pieces in place that they have now.
A couple of things are changing slowly in Los Angeles with the Chargers. Firstly, the home crowd last night before the game started. LA for so long has been a destination for road fans. They're actually now bringing in their own fans and making an atmosphere for their own team, which is a huge departure from where it's been. And again, that's going back to Harbaugh, what he's creating. Herbert is a different quarterback with Harbaugh. He's bringing that, and I don't want to labor the point, but he's bringing that kind of the solidity and the stability of what was going on at Michigan. And it's just spreading around the team. I did like I said at the start of the season, I like the pickup of J.K. Dobbins and Gus Edwards. Edwards hasn't played much, but Dobbins has been great. He's that kind of quintessential RB1 that you want to get the yards, and we saw what he did last night. But I'm just, this Chargers team has been a running joke for years in the league. This is the game they would have blown, and this is the game that, as we've discussed many, many times, they would have either lost on the field goal or they would have given up a back-breaking touchdown with 30 seconds to go. Think back to the Jaguars game, even in the playoffs a couple of years ago. That's been their calling card. Is it too soon to say they've turned the corner? Maybe, but it's a damn sight different to how they've been the last 5, 6, 7, even more than that years. It's a different team. It's a different mentality. They're tougher. They're not that soft kind of LA. We'll go in and it'll be a home game for us, because the Bengals do travel. They bring a huge road presence as well. So the fact that the Chargers are able to start turning that stadium into somewhat of a home ground or a home stadium is very impressive. And again, it's Harbaugh. It's more of his mentality. We're going to run the ball. We're going to be tough. We're going to be physical, which is not what the Chargers have been. Probably not in 15, 20 years, not since when they had LaDainian Tomlinson and even Phillip Rivers back there. So it's a whole culture shift with the Chargers, and it all goes back to Harbaugh, what he's doing. Saying that, I mean, Herbert he started off with his hair on fire yesterday. I think he went 6 for 6 right at the start, 123 and a touchdown. He couldn't miss players. He was making dots. He was thrown to a guy that could have been a bust coming out of TCU, Quentin Johnson, who's turned things around in this year with the Chargers. But everything's changing, and it's all starting with Harbaugh. It's that mentality. It's that kind of solidity and stability that he brings, despite the fact they almost blew it. But again, I'll give the Bengals some credit for coming back into the game, and Joe Burrow for throwing the ball 50 times and 356 yards. But the Chargers were able to pull it out, and they're able to get the score when they needed, because that would not have been the case last year, the year before. They would have been on the other side of that result. So things are changing in Los Angeles. Will it be enough to do any damage in the playoffs this year? We'll see, but it's definitely a lot better than it's been in the last while.
Brian, just a quick point on Zach Taylor. I think last season, when the Bengals season sort of came apart in the end, and they didn't make the playoff push they were expecting because of the talent they have, everyone was like, okay, well, Joe Burrow was injured. That's not the case now, and they've been out of the race very early on. That's another game which they had to rely on a late comeback to even be in contention of winning. They're now sitting at 4-7. Very difficult to make the playoffs from here now. You have to wonder what the excuse is now for Zach Taylor.
Yeah, for me, he makes critical mistakes at critical junctures in the game. Like, Burrow's 27 touchdowns this year and 4 interceptions, and yet the team is 4-7. And for me, it comes down to games and big opportunities to win games. We spoke time and time again this season about certain situations in games, which, like, sometimes it's that one play, like against the Ravens in overtime, when they couldn't stop Jamar Chase throughout the course of the game. He changes his dynamic and goes run. He goes with a run offense, and we couldn't understand that because they were turning up all day. Last week, I know we had our own discussion around going for the 2-point conversion. I would have taken overtime. And yesterday, this one for me is even more bizarre. 1:25 to go, and the Chargers got the ball back with 55 seconds to go. He essentially ran 20 seconds, give or take. Sorry, 20 seconds off the clock. 20 seconds off the clock. Yeah, because he threw the ball 3 times. He literally said, "There's no run game here for us. We're not going to even try explore the run game." Like, the Bengals get the ball back with 1.5 to go. Essentially, you're thinking, right, this is the Bengals game. They're going to find their way into field goal range and do a killer to the Chargers, who played so well all night. But he has 3 incomplete passes, no time off the clock, and essentially gives the Chargers a great opportunity to go and win the game. They score a touchdown as opposed to a field goal. I just can't understand it. We spoke time and time again about this team can't run the ball effectively. I get all that, but in that situation, you got to try to have a balanced offense to try at least draw this Chargers defense onto you, allowing for the opportunity to go after Chase and other players. But they didn't. They just literally went, shotgun, throw, no time off the clock. Chargers get a great opportunity to win it. Strange for me. This is why this team won't go to playoffs, because time and time again he makes huge mistakes and doesn't run the ball effectively and doesn't put themselves in the best situation to win games after having such a huge comeback. You could see it in Joe Burrow's kind of demeanor after the game, how frustrated he was, because he knew that game was there. So when he knew that at 1:25 to go, they had the ball to go and win that game.
Well, you were mentioning there that one-dimensional football does not often win games, but you would see what's happening in Indianapolis at the moment, and you see that the fact they're able to mix a passing game with the run game managed to help them just about edge out the New York Jets. We saw Anthony Richardson come back, which I'm not quite sure how many people were expecting that or how much confidence he would have in his own game. He didn't throw any interceptions this time, which is slightly unusual. Managed to complete 20 of his 30 passes, also managed to do a lot of running. The Colts managed to run more plays than they passed as they just about edged the Jets. And no, we have, as we were recording this, we don't know the result yet of the Texans versus the Cowboys on Monday Night Football. The AFC South is still maybe up for grabs. The Colts sitting at 5-6, but I'm saying that knowing full well that the Colts beat the Jets. And as I said here on Thursday night, I don't trust the Jets to win any game. And this is just another case where, against an opponent that was probably beatable, the Colts did a couple of things right. I think Jonathan Taylor probably wasn't as explosive as he needed to be, but they managed to run out the right situations. And this is a battle between 2 very different quarterback stories, and the young gun managed to get the extra point against Aaron Rodgers, who is just leading another just end the season type season from New York.
Yeah, it was actually fascinating for both quarterbacks, as you say. The young player who looked like they had lost faith in, and they dropped him to bring him back and to do what he did, to do what he did with his arm. But those two touchdowns to show really that extra option he does give you on the ground that Joe Flacco doesn't. That when he's on form and when you use him right, I mean, he can bulldoze people at that line, and that's what he did for two of those touchdowns. And you see that extra dimension that he does bring. And then obviously you mentioned Aaron Rodgers and the Jets. And I mean, this roster looks a better roster to me than they're playing. But whatever the reason is, they are where they are. And it's going to be really interesting. Myself and Kieran talked about it like last night. Now, I mean, this is done for the Jets now. There is no conning yourself into thinking there's a way through this now. It's over. And it's going to be interesting to see how this team now continues for the rest of the year. Are they done mentally? Are they going to just be finished with it? I mean, there was talk Aaron Rodgers is going to come back, but does he really want to? I mean, this is the move he made where he was thinking he could challenge. And it's been a disaster, obviously, an injury in his first year. And this year, even when he's getting his own players there, Devontae Adams come in, it's not making a difference. There's just a negativity there now at the moment that you wonder where the Jets can go from here. And for the Colts, I mean, I'm not overly sold on the Colts. I think Richardson can be hit or miss week in, week out. But I think it's right for him to be in there now. When you thought you could challenge and you thought Joe Flacco might give you that edge, I understand going to the experienced player because you think he might push you over the line, but it wasn't happening for him. So you're better off getting that young player in there. And there are going to be weeks where he can do this kind of stuff that he did yesterday. And you mentioned it, this division is still there for the Colts if they can string a few victories together. The Texans, who should have been or who look to be the better team in this division, haven't looked the Texans that a lot of people expected. And tonight's game will be interesting, obviously, to see what they can do against a bad Cowboys team. I think they will win. But again, who knows the way this division has gone? And the Colts are right within touching distance there now for any mistakes the Texans might make. So, look, they brought Richardson in. He showed what he can do. They'll want that regularly for him to keep that challenge up. So it's going to be interesting again to see what this Colts team can do week on week with Richardson back in as the starter, because I can't imagine they'll be taking him out again. So this is the quarterback for the year now. So we're going to see what he can do.
Kieran, it was interesting previewing this match with you here because we know that you have explained your lack of confidence in Anthony Richardson, but also your lack of confidence in the Jets as an organization. And I think, especially since Robert Saleh got fired, I've shared the lack of confidence in the Jets. When you look at the games they've lost as well, and the very close nature of some of them. Against the Bills, it was by 3 points. They lost quite big against the Steelers. Lost against the Patriots, which, you know, is you want to be pretty bad to be losing against the Patriots most days. Sure enough, they beat the Jets and then got hammered by the Cardinals before this 1 point loss against the Colts. The season seems a bit done now, and it seems like the two gambles that they made, the gamble to bring in Aaron Rodgers and the gamble to get rid of Robert Saleh when things didn't seem to be going 100% in the middle of the season, are two shots they took in the dark and two shots that just didn't work.
That should be the Jets' motto: shots in the dark. I mean, that's how it's been for the last 50 years. I wanted to talk about a couple of things with the Jets. Sauce Gardner, where's he been, and what's happened to him? He was the defensive player that everybody talked about, and he's been anonymous this year.
He got hosed yesterday, Kieran. Hosed by Josh.
Yeah. And his attitude sucks. He's his demeanor. He's just another player that got gassed early. He's got a fancy nickname, and he made a lot of money on that. But what's his longevity in the league? What's his lasting legacy? And that's kind of emblematic of the Jets as a whole. Devontae Adams is gone, hasn't done much. He's had a couple of nice catches. He had a decent game yesterday. But Rodgers is the problem. I mean, I've seen, reading the New York Post, Rodgers wants to come back. Well, who do the Jets want him back? What team is going to want him back? I mean, the cap hit is incredible. He's got $49 million of dead cap money against the $23.5 million cap hit. So if he retires, the Jets are going to absorb $14 million in 25, and they could absorb $35 million in 26. So they're stuck with a huge problem now, because if he wants to play, if Rodgers wants to play again next year, they're stuck with him. What are they going to do? And we've all seen that he's practically the GM right now, so they've got a massive problem. The other problem is he going to decide to hang it up and have a fake injury come December when the weather gets cold and it gets a little nasty outside, and decide to take him out of games because he doesn't want to risk 2025? There's a whole bunch of things going on with the Jets that, again, it's a classic. It's another classic year of Jets in Jets world. They create so many problems for themselves, short-term solutions. I mean, Joe Douglas is most likely out the door too at this stage. We can argue till the sun goes down about the merits of getting rid of Salah, but now you've got Rodgers, and it's not just a fact of saying you want to get rid of him, but it's the cap hit that's going to be the big issue for the Jets. And on top of that, what do they do with Devonta Adams? Is he going to want to come back? And what do you do with all these big time kind of players that you have on the team, from Sauce Gardner, Breece Hall? He did okay yesterday too, but it's at this stage the Jets look like Rodgers and Breece Hall. That's the offense, and we're going to try and see what we can do with the rest of the team. But that I said last week that the reason why the Colts would win this game was going to be Jonathan Taylor against the run defense, and that's really what happened. The Jets couldn't stop the ball. Colts went out to a 10-0 lead. A couple of shaky plays for the Jets. For the Colts, the Jets started to come back into it, but I always felt that the Colts were going to come back into it. But it's just what the Jets are. No identity, no backbone, no strength, no purpose. Another lost year, but again, a lot of the talk is going to be off the field, and it's going to be Rodgers. What does he want to do? Where does he want to do it? How does he want to do it? How much power will he have? Because what other team, in reality, after this season, what other team in the league, if he wants to continue playing, is going to want to touch that problem? Because you've already given him basically GM rights with the Jets, so he's going to be looking for that anywhere else he goes, if he decides to go anywhere. Or he could hang it up at the end of the year, or he could, come December, he might say, you know what, I'm done. Thanks a lot. I'm going to sail away into the Caribbean. But just the Jets just do it themselves every year. And it's the reason why I said at the start of the year how bad they'd be. I've just seen it too many times. It plays out the same way every single year. They can't help themselves. They're just a terribly run organization.
Brian, your old sparring partner in Colin Cronin was probably delighted with the way that the Denver Broncos have been performing so far this season. A 38-6 victory over the Atlanta Falcons, I think, unexpectedly big. Maybe some of us probably expected Denver to play well. I just think it's interesting though, because every time anybody brings up the Broncos, all everybody talks about is defense. And here's Bo Nix throwing 4 touchdowns, over 300 yards, showing himself to be a pretty strong rookie. We see how well he's been working with Sean Payton. I think he's doing a pretty good job there. They're sitting 7th in the wild card slot in a very competitive race in the AFC. They have a lot of tough games to go the rest of the season. But how seriously should we really be taking this Broncos team?
Serious enough, I would imagine, bearing in mind how well they're playing. Sean Payton's always been a fantastic head coach, and I know he's disliked or not disliked, and Alan Brown sent the P word to me today, and I kind of brushed it off. And it's more about the schedule and the nature of some of the teams they're going to play and whether they can realistically live with them. How this AFC wildcard is going to evolve over the course of the weeks. What I would say, you're right, you're called it out there. Well, first thing I would have said, Kieran, I got to give Kieran credit. He said on Thursday that Broncos would win because this Falcons defense is soft, and by golly, was it soft yesterday. I mean, some of the touchdowns, it was like as if there was the same play called essentially time and time again. Just a quick slant out to the wide receiver and let the wide receiver go in behind all the offensive guys. And obviously, we saw the touchdown with Williams. That's obviously a running touchdown. But the players yesterday on the Falcons had looked like they had no interest. But I want to come to Bo Nix because we're talking about next year's draft already, and we're talking about quarterbacks that aren't at the level. This is a poor draft coming out. But we all felt Bo Nix wasn't at that level to be a top 10 quarterback. And yet now we're seeing Bo Nix playing. It's more a level of confidence he's playing. And he's getting that from a head coach who said from day one he felt that he should have been in the top 10. I don't know if he's going to say that because it's the one which they selected. But what you can see now is a quarterback with confidence, understanding the nature of what's expected of him. And he's delivering. And some of the passes and the precision of the passes are really impressive. And he's struck up a great relationship with Court and various other players across the offense. And right now, it looks like a team that could be dangerous come December. And I looked at week 18, for example, and the Chiefs have to go in there. The Chiefs have to go in there for number 1 seed, and the Broncos are playing for a wild card place. That game will be huge, and a huge game. Mile High is a dangerous place to go.
They got to go in there and get something. They got to go in there and get something. I'd love it. He'd love it. It's that kind of game, though, isn't it?
But Sean Payton has that kind of demeanor. People don't like me, but the players love me, and that's kind of a bit like the Harbaugh kind of scenario. Like that's the way it is because he's a great head coach in his own way. He's won a Super Bowl. Players want to play for him, and then on the opposite side, the Falcons, who will be well used to Sean Payton. I think what did he say on the news last night? He was voted most hated person in the Atlanta Chronicle years ago because of the dislike for the Falcons and the Saints. So obviously, he was delighted yesterday to pour on for me a poor Falcons team yesterday. They never got going whatsoever.
Two quick points on NFC North teams before we talk about the quarterback situation in the blue half of New York. Firstly, I just want to quickly touch on the Lions, and I don't know how much more we can really say about this. Only holy shit, every week there's something else that we see coming in. And it was really nice yesterday to see that. You see the Jared Goff after a couple of weeks where he seemed a little bit shaky, but the team managed to find a way to carry the victory. That Jared Goff managed to find himself back. He completed 24 passes for 412 yards, 4 touchdowns. The Lions had over 600 yards of offense, scored 52 points to the Jags 6. It's actually the worst defeat in Jacksonville Jaguars history, and we're all very much on sack watch in northern Florida. But
are you feeling sorry for Jared Goff, Shane? Are you
feeling sorry for Jared Goff?
That sounds like poor Jared Goff is back.
Well, no, as in like there was a couple of weeks where he was looking where like there was some interceptions thrown or whatever, but the rest of the team managed to build it up. And I'd say that's the fundamentals of a good squad. And Amon Ross St. Brown seems to be scoring a touchdown every week. It's like there's 2 things you know for sure are going to happen on Sunday: Mass at 11 o'clock and an Amon Ross St. Brown touchdown at 7. That seems to be the way that there's been going every week. And elsewhere in the NFC North, no, the Vikings obviously managed to get a close win against the Titans. I would just wonder, in the NFC North race, in the NFC race in general, where do you think the Vikings are sitting at now after managing to get another win under their belt?
Yeah, look, you can't discount him. I mean, Sam Darnold had felt like a couple of tough weeks where people were questioning, has the old Sam Darnold come back? But look, he had a good game yesterday. He goes out there and, he goes for 20 of 32 with 2 touchdowns. Obviously, he has Jefferson there and Addison, who are great targets. But look, this is a team, the Brian Flores defense, is a fairly capable defense. I think at times it can get overblown at how good it is, but I think he does enough trickery to kind of cause confusion for offensive lines and quarterbacks that it's definitely a defense that will get them, will get them results. And then you have an offense where Aaron Jones, has quite a game yesterday, 39 yards, but still he's a running back who can do a lot of damage. And then, as I mentioned, Jefferson, Addison. So this is a team with a really good offensive line as well. So if Darnold is on form, and for most of the season he has been more often than not, I think this is a Vikings team that will still fancy the chances. They're not going to win the North. This Lions team is just head and shoulders above everybody in that NFC North. But look, why can't the Vikings get themselves in there? They're 8-2. They on their day they can beat anyone. So yeah, it's going to be interesting. I think it's going to be tough for the Packers, who look like they have a good young team, but are maybe a little bit more inconsistent. We talked about Love earlier on. I think the guys at the Lions and the Vikings just seem to have that more stability about them, that more confidence in these veteran quarterbacks who have kind of stepped up and may have been questioned at one point in their career whether they were past it or it was done. And they've shown that if you can get the right guys around them and the right coaching staff, and it's the coaching staffs that are massive as well for these teams, if you can get the right coaches in there with these players, then their experience counts for a lot, and they can do a lot. So it's going to be interesting to see. As I say, the Lions will take the North, I think, but the Vikings absolutely will be there or thereabouts for the playoffs. And then once you hit the playoffs and it's knockout football, anything can happen, and they have the targets and the threats to beat any team on their day.
And we are finally moving to the elephant in the room here, being the recent news that Daniel Jones has been benched as New York Giants quarterback. But more bizarrely, the person that the Giants have selected to replace him is not Drew Lock. What were you saying, Kieran? Is he being paid $5 million a year to be the backup? For what? To buy real estate in the Jersey Shore? Because Tommy DeVito is going to be the one that'll be starting for the Giants the next time they play out. And look, I got to say, I was a big fan of the whole DeVito theater last year. I'm not a Giants fan. I'm not a fan of a team in the NFC. I could look at it from afar and just enjoy for what it was. The whole people doing the whole cutlass thing in the hands and the Sopranos. But that was fun for like 3 or 4 weeks. The fact that it's coming back now screams to me that the Giants are looking more for a reason to get people to buy tickets and a reason to tank so they can draft the top quarterback next year. Otherwise, why would Drew Lock be in the building? Because even the message that's sending to people in the locker room saying, yeah, we're just going to skip over the guy that's been the second string and has been doing well enough in practice, and just go for the guy whose mom cooks chicken. That's that's the guy we're going for. I just think that's an unusual message for Brian Daboll to be sending.
Who wants this? Oh, Kieran, go you.
Sorry, Kieran.
Like you said, I mean, the 3 or 4 weeks of DeVito got old after 3 or 4 days. I mean, we could go and talk forever about all that nonsense with the hand gestures. It was fun for a couple of minutes. The Giants got a couple of wins that they probably shouldn't have got, and that definitely cost them this year. I'm not one of these guys who talks about tanking, because you can't tank in football. It's not like any other sport. You can't half-ass that out there. You get your butt whooped. But I saw the Dable presser earlier, and he said, we evaluated the usual stuff. We evaluated everybody, and we thought that it was tough for Daniel. But Dable's he's coaching for his job right now. He's got 7 games left, and the reality is there's 7 games left, and he thinks that Cutlets or DeVito is going to have to give him the best chance of winning, and that's what he needs right now. Because if he finishes the season the way it's been, there's a very strong chance that Mara will, who is already getting weekly and probably daily reminders about the Saquon move. Mara's patience may run out, but again, we talked about that kind of bounce that quarterback changes or coach changes give to teams. The Giants don't have an especially tough schedule the next 3 weeks. They got the Bucks, who it could go either way. Cowboys, a beat up Cowboys team on Thanksgiving, and then they got the Saints after that. They could reasonably get 2 wins out of those 3 games, and then that's going to scupper the whole draft thing. The whole draft, concept. And again, the draft is too hard. You can't purposely lose games to get a top 5 pick. The draft that the Giants should have done work on was the one that just passed. And the one that they really should do is in 2026. So, I'm looking for a bridge quarterback for this year. I just saw Dan Duggan, Giants beat writer, mention that Justin Fields will be a perfect bridge to 2026. I wouldn't be opposed to that. But it's more mismanagement. And I think right now the coals are really to Dable's feet. He knows he's got to finish the season strong. He's got to keep seats in MetLife. He's got to keep interest in that media market, because the Knicks are going to be good. The Islanders and Rangers are going to be good. The Jets are always taking back pages. So the Giants have to stay relevant into January. They've got to keep people talking about him. So he's going to be scrambling for any way he can get wins. He doesn't care about draft position right now. He needs to get wins. He needs to show Mara that he can finish the season strong with a limited set and then try again in 25. But I'm not overly enthusiastic about this move. It says a lot about where Drew Lock is as a quarterback. But I guess we're going Tommy Cutlets. Brian, it's over to you.
The Giants need a good draft pick, and there's 9 teams with 3 wins or less. Kieran's alluded to it. The reason why he's in is because he genuinely believes he gives them the best opportunity to win. And Joe Shane and Brian Dable have to win games to convince the owner they should remain in situ for next season. And they're going to play an undrafted quarterback that essentially he's probably playing for his career in terms of, it's not with the Giants, he'll get a backup job elsewhere. The writing's been on the wall for Drew Lock for quite some time. He played in pre-season. He couldn't do anything offensively. He came on against the Eagles in the 4th quarter and played the entirety of that game, and he couldn't do anything in that game. So I wasn't surprised in any way that they went with Tommy Cutlets. In fact, I agree with Kieran. I think he'll give them a bounce, and I wouldn't be surprised if they do go a little bit of a run and win a few games, and it'll be a carbon copy of where they were last year. They went on a 3-game run. It was enjoyable at the time, but ultimately it cost them Drake May an opportunity to potentially even go after Jaden Daniels. And we could be back. We'll probably be back. Even yesterday's result, Shane, Giants didn't play yesterday, and they went down to the 5th pick in the draft next year because of the nature of other teams that lost. So they didn't even on their weekend. They lost the bye week. And yet they're not even playing. And that's what's going to happen. They'll find themselves sitting between 5 and 10. They won't get near the 2 quarterbacks, which I wouldn't say they're standout quarterbacks, but Kieran's right, you call them. They're the only 2 of note. But what I would say is, like I said earlier, I don't get carried away with that, because Bo Nix was not supposed to be a 4th-round pick, and there he is. He's lights out right now for the Broncos. For me, it depends on which head coach you've got in situ in terms of your draft selection and who your right quarterback is. And Noel kind of alludes to that with Eberflus and Williams, and whether they should have reset the situation and brought in a new head coach for a rookie quarterback. That's probably the bigger question for me. Is Brian Daboll and Joe Shane going to be there? I have a feeling they will be, but I'm not entirely convinced they should be, because a lot of this season's decision making has been on them.
It's gas. You have to love the NFL. Only in the NFL can you lose in a week that you didn't play. That's just an incredible line. But that is it for now. We are back on Thursday at 9 o'clock for our Week 12 preview. Don't forget that this week's football kicks off on Thursday night between the Browns and the Steelers in another crunch AFC North matchup. But for now, to everyone listening and tuning in, thank you very much.